Fall of Bloodglove and the War Hag by Jay Wilburn. As she raced toward the castle on her bare feet, Wevela's muddled gray goblin skin glowed with the blue magic of the artifact that may have changed her forever. She wasn't going to need forever with what she had planned. The walls stood tall and white with stones that showed no evidence of the spilled blood these dirty creatures were responsible for. The arrows flew at once, a rain of death on every side of her. Most of the arrows missed. Wivela dodged the thicker and darker clouds of falling points, but some found their target. They had to, really. Human archers were the deadliest creatures ever to plague the land. If it were not so, Blecht would still be alive to love her. The magic that surrounded her like blue burning fumes stopped some of those arrows, but not all. The sharp points tore through her tough hide where they hit in sections not covered by her armor. Black blood oozed from the wounds, but she dared not pull those razor points from her muscle yet. Next, tar-covered projectiles ignited in the buckets of their catapults and hurled through the air as they arced toward her. These were easier to dodge, but when they exploded against the ground, the flames spilled out in all directions like waves of fire. Some of the stuff caught and burned patches of raw pink wound into her flesh. She did not slow to take the time to smother the burning tar. To do so might be smart, but it would make her a stationary target. Her own survival was not important beyond finishing this attack. As the dirty humans prepared to dump rocks on her head from the top of the walls, she leapt the moat and crashed through one of the low windows, taking much of the stone frame inside with her momentum. One poor archer, who probably thought he was quite safe in that window, stumbled backward in shock. He still tried to fire on her, but she swung her pig iron sword through his bow, snapping the wood of the limbs and the leather string, sending the arrow spinning away into a dark corner. Forgetting her sword, she swiped her dark claws through his body, tearing away his clothing, his throat, and much of the top layers of his face. He tumbled away on the floor, bleeding and screaming. She could have easily finished killing him, but his raw agony was like music to her ears as she pressed on into the hallway. Several shouts carried down from above. They were trying to find where she had ended up. Wivela really wanted to kill every last one of them, but she decided the wiser move would be to cover as much ground as she could while chaos still ruled. There were plenty of humans scampering about these passages as she raced along. Most were not warriors, but rather servants who were caught in the wrong place. She cared not for any of their lives. If they served Bloodglove or his hag, they were her enemy and had contributed to the senseless slaying of her man. Human blood, as red as juice from poison berries, painted the walls as she passed. The rest of their guts spilled out across the flagstones behind her. These things stunk as bad on the inside as they did on the outside. She could not afford to pause to enjoy the work of her revenge, not to mention that even the dumbest humans would be able to simply follow the bright red bloody trail of her slaughter to track her. She had to cross the open ground of the keep in order to get to the inner palace itself. Chaos and the stink of human fear provided some cover, but not enough. She opted for no delay and fled along the wall of the smithery before she was completely exposed again. The cries of those who spotted her hurt her ears. The arrows and spears striking the ground in her wake threatened to hurt more than just her ears. They never got a piece of her this time, and she laughed as she crashed through the oaken doors of the palace. Some warriors chased behind her with weapons drawn. Armored knights waited behind those doors for her, but they still cried out in surprise to see her there among them and the flying splinters. Their weapons sliced into her armor and brought forth more black blood. She employed her own cruder weapon and broke through their metal plating faster than she imagined they liked. Their pink hides, the color of wounded flesh in her mind, were not nearly as tough as her skin. The moment she broke through their armor, their skin parted, their organs ruptured, their bones broke, and they bled out their worthless lives. Then that lovely screaming came again. How easily they died, though, made her all the angrier. These weak and selfish creatures had no right to end the life of a true warrior like Blecht, not if they were this easy to snuff out. At the risk of snapping her iron sword, she battered them harder to make them pay for his life. As voices of the approaching mob behind her grew louder, she charged onward to stay ahead of them. A few more humans challenged her along the way, but they were quick to flee or easy to kill without Wivola having to break stride. She skirted the throne room and saw a few squires standing outside those closed doors. It could be that her targets were in there and they'd never expected her to get this far. As she cut her way through the few squires, the others fled. This told her everything she needed to know. This was but a distraction. The real king and queen were either in the tower or on their way there. She pursued with all haste. The stairs of the tower were blocked by full-grown adult knights. This was the place, then. The steps spiraled upward to the right, so that right-handed warriors found themselves striking the wall as they fought through the narrow space. Wivola laughed because she swung her sword left-handed and made her way up the steps as she took away one knight's head after another. Finally, she grew impatient and used her claws and teeth to rip away every man between her and the people who needed to pay the most. The last men at the top of the stairs were older and had no helmets. Wivola believed these men to be the most loyal. To be the most loyal to the king and queen behind the last door. While she respected loyalty, she could not stomach the devotion. I keep losing my place here. She could not stomach the devotion to those who slayed the innocent or served evil. She roared at them as they stabbed at her with long spears, too big for this tight space. They must have been counting on luck. She took hold of the metal points of the spearheads and bent them around backward. There was no room for them to turn the spears to get an angle on the large goblin, so she batted the useless weapons aside and drove into them with all her force. They tried to escape along the walls, but she swept them together into her arms like a mother scooping up her children. They spit out curses and showed their ugly, dull teeth. Wivola bit through their skulls one after the other, dumping out chunks of their brains. She dropped their bodies and vomited out their horrid flavor. A whimper rose from behind that last door. How dare that worthless hag show small fear now after all she had done? Wivola hammered on the door with her great fists until the wood split and the hardware broke away. As the door fell, she stepped aside and the arrows that fired from within bounced off the stone wall across this high passage. She rushed in and took down the archers hiding inside. There he was, that godless monster, the human king who made war against the goblins and killed her man in cold blood. Bloodglove swept the War Hag behind him. Wivola could see he had no hope of saving his wife, but needed to feel like a man at the end all the same. "What do you want, monster?" he asked in a shaky voice that betrayed his terror. Wivola roared. She started in her native tongue, but then broke into the common language of humans. "You took him, you overwhelmed him with your numbers, and you lifted his beautiful black heart in your glove before you burned it and him. Goblins attacked us first. Our war," Wivola yelled, "was with the Grey Elves, and they have no love for humans. You have love for war and hate for all creatures not human. That was your only reason. Goblins burned our villages built on land. Goblin kind had ruled for thousands of years before your kind could even forge metal. Well, the wars are over. You should not be here." Her eyes burned blue as she flipped over their ornate bed, and it tumbled aside. He backed into the wall hard enough to possibly crush his wife behind him. She let out another whimper, and Wivola wanted to rip her apart for it. "My kind are the Hogboon. We never once attacked a human settlement. But you can't tell the difference between a hobgoblin, an orc, or a hogboon, can you?" Bloodglove showed his dull teeth and said, "Is there a difference?" As she rushed forward, he changed his tune completely. The human king dropped to his knees, forgot all about protecting his wife, and promised Wivola anything she wanted up to half his kingdom. He said all these things as she tore into him and shredded his insides into mush. She was surprised with how long he could still scream with most of his stinking insides spread around the room on the outside. Beyond senseless killing, it appeared that screaming was what humans did best. The War Hag dropped to her hands and knees and crawled across the floor toward the overturned bed. Her hair was bent in unnatural spiraled curves. curls. Her lips were painted red like their fresh spilled blood. Some rosy powder that had been painted high over her cheeks like a false blush that against her pale human skin made Wivola think of corpses. Wivola tore out Bloodglove's heart last and held the ugly red thing above her head. Now her fist was bloody with the dead heart of her greatest enemy. If I want a piece of your kingdom, I will take it for myself. The heart sizzled from the blue magic leaking out of the goblin's skin. Wivola consumed the heart despite the sour flavor of human all through it. As she turned, she spied the War Hag with her long hair spiral curled the color of straw streaming down her narrow bony shoulders. The hag turned up a bottle that had been scattered to the floor with the other spilled items in the room. The goblin raced forward and slapped the stuff out of the hag's hand before the creature could consume what was inside. Wivola lifted the human queen by her throat. The wretched creature cried, whimpered, and sniffled. That works. The goblin turned up her gray lip in disgust. You have quite a taste for murder until it comes to your own bedchamber, the goblin growled in the War Hag's face. You think I'll let you poison yourself and die in quiet peace after all the nights you've slept peacefully since you stole him from me. I've never been on the battlefield, the War Hag whispered. Lies. I saw you upon a cushioned chair, high on a hill as your man slaughtered Hogboon children. The hag shook her head. I was there for... I don't make war. I didn't know they were children. They were so big. They were different from you is what you mean, War Hag. Not being a warrior does not excuse your part in his death. He defended our caves and our people with his life, longer than you have been alive. There is no justice in a world where you live and he does not. Then please kill me, she begged the goblin. Make it quick if you are truly better than us. Wivola showed her sharp teeth. I am better than you, but it will be quite slow. Shouting voices rose as more human warriors charged up the spiral stairs of the tower, littered with bodies and gore. Time was up. Wivola tucked the sniveling War Hag under her gray arm and struck the curved wall with her bulk. The stone fell away, and she leapt through the air to the outer wall far beyond the keep. The blue energy around her buzzed inside her head and pulsed painfully through her veins. The price she offered the goblin gods for this power, let's say these powers, was going to come due soon. The arrows still sticking out of her sent sharp pain through her magically enhanced body. The warriors, still on the wall, looked up in shock. The great goblin, surrounded by the residue of the artifact's magic, jumped from the battlements to the ground outside the castle walls. The land was riddled with arrows and scorched black in several places, but Wivola planned to be long gone before the War Hag's people rallied to follow. It was time these humans learned the cost of coming after her kind.